Today we are speaking with Mairead Dennehy from TUS Midwest. Good morning, Mairead.
Good morning.
Can you tell us more about yourself and why you are here on campus today?
Well, I'm a lecturer in the Department of Applied Science in TUS, and the modules or the courses that I teach on are the medical technology programs. And I myself come from a kind of a varied background. My own degree was in electronic engineering. Then I worked in analog devices for a while as an electronic engineer. Then I did a master's in biomedical engineering in UL. And while I was doing that, I was working in a company in Galway who make ventilators. And after that, I got into what's called medical physics, which is a term that not many people might know about. But medical physics is applying physics to medicine. And a lot of it is to do with what's called diagnostic imaging and radiotherapy. So that's X-rays, CT, MRIs, things like that. And I worked in a hospital for 10 years as a medical physicist in radiotherapy. And after that, I began lecturing in TUS. So what I teach is really broad, applying kind of technology and applying science to medicine. So it's everything from how X-rays are taken, the safety around using ionisation and radiation for X-rays, how radiotherapy works to treat cancer with ionising radiation. But I also do things like the electronics in stuff like sensors. So, if you go to the hospital, the first thing they do is put on pulse oximetry on your finger, or they do things like measure your ECG, your heart rate, or measuring your blood pressure. And that's all using technology. So that's what we learn about in the medical technology course.
Oh, and Mairead, can you tell us what is medical technology?
Yeah, so medical technology is applying all the sciences and all engineering to the equipment that's used in medicine. And in terms of careers, there's kind of two branches. One branch is working in a hospital as a clinical engineer or clinical engineering technician. And I always say, the doctors and the nurses, they treat the patients. But the clinical engineers maintain and test, fix any problems with, ensure all the equipment is working correctly so the doctors and nurses can do their job. So that if, a nurse needs to, for example, give chemotherapy medicine, they will say, the rate of the medicine that needs to go to the patient, but they're assuming that piece of equipment, when they say, 50 litres in, whatever time that they're setting it, they are assuming that equipment is working correctly. And that's what the clinical engineer does. They ensure that happens. So some of our graduates are working in hospitals, the hospital in Doyle, also the brand new Children's Hospital in Dublin. We have a graduate working there, and in the hospital in Galway. But we also then have kind of another side, the other kind of career kind of side in medical technology is in industry. So companies that make and manufacture medical equipment. And that can be everything from what we would call medical electronic systems, so things like ventilators, physiological patient monitors, also things like, the X-ray equipment I was talking about. But there's also then things like implantable things like stents for the heart. So, if anyone knows anyone who might, needed a heart bypass or have stents implanted in their heart, they are medical technology that are manufactured in Ireland. And also, very locally here is Crew Medical that manufacture hip replacements. And they would be the medical technology that we learn about. And what we need to learn about in order to manufacture them is, what do they do? Well, it's replacing a bone in the hip. So it needs to do the function of bone, things like weight bearing when you're walking. Also, it needs to have very low kind of wear resistance so that, it's a kind of a fluid motion when you're walking. And they're all the things that we take into account. So it's applying things like biomechanics, biomaterials, and even doing things like CAD and 3D drawing. I'm sure you have access to all the AutoCAD and SolidWorks and all that, here. Yeah. So we use those to do things like drawing prosthetic hips and understanding, how they work in that way. So they're the kind of the two sides. There's the hospital side, but there's also the industry side. And Ireland really punches above its weight when it comes to manufacturing medical equipment. And an amazing stat that I thought was so cool around COVID was that Ireland was one of the top 5 countries producing the equipment, whether it was ventilators, whether it was, the PPE, masks and, things like that. That's also another company near here, Irema, that they're, I suppose, near Kilmallock, that make face masks. And also things like, like syringes and cardiac equipment. So we were, for a small little country, a little island in the corner of the Atlantic, we were one of the top 5 countries in the world producing equipment needed to fight COVID. So, and then we have the whole side of our pharmaceutical industry that's, producing vaccines and producing all the other, types of pharmaceutical products. So there's a huge need and companies love Ireland. They love Ireland because of the graduates and because of the young talent like yourselves who are going to TUS and who are, becoming great graduates and becoming great employees. So we have a thriving industry in Ireland and it is really exciting.
And what careers would a qualification in medical technology lead to?
Yeah, so one would be that clinical engineer in a hospital, like I said. So things like maintaining the equipment. And it's not just about, you have the equipment and you make sure it works. Because it's medical devices, there's a whole quality aspect to it. And there's lots of regulations, European regulations and different types of international regulations and international standards that dictate or decide what tests need to be done. So, I worked in the company in Galway that make ventilators. And some days I used to think, we could just be making really fancy washing machines here. But the difference was these were life-saving equipment and you had to, it's the regulations around it. It's not just the mechanics and the electrical components. So that's one aspect of it. But as well as that, it's doing things like, let's say the new Children's Hospital project, there's 90 billion euro budget towards the technology being used in that hospital. And there is one, there's one manager, but then there's a whole group of people that are all clinical engineers that are doing things like deciding how many of each piece of equipment are needed. What specs do all those equipment need? And we're now entering such a digital age for digital health, and there is this term being kind of thrown around, digital health transformation, where we already have it that if I, let's say, fell and bumped my head, I could have a CT in the hospital in Doyle. But if I was first referred to someone in Beaumont Hospital in Dublin, they'd be able to look at my images. They get it digitally. And that might seem, oh yeah, of course, it's a digital image, you can just send it up. But it's not, because this has patient data. So there's all the data integrity around it. But we're now coming to the stage where you could be connected to a monitor measuring your heart rate, your blood pressure, and all that information is being saved. And everything is becoming more and more digital. So that digital transformation is really driving why you need kind of specialists in medical technology that also have knowledge of IT infrastructure and also programming. So our students also learn Python programming is what we do, and we apply that then and we look into doing AI, because things like even diagnosing patients, AI is becoming quite a big part of it. So I suppose we want to make sure our graduates are future-proofed and have the knowledge and the skills to be able to do those types of requirements that will be needed. And so there's in the hospital, clinical engineers in the hospital. Then you have the companies who make the equipment. So you could be based in, designing the equipment. You could be around, the quality requirements. There's huge a demand for people with the technical knowledge, but also the quality and regulatory, I'm going to say that again, the technical knowledge as well as the quality and the regulatory knowledge, to manufacture that equipment and to get it to market and to get it out to the patients who need it. So that people with a really good idea, a new way to treat a patient, a new way to, test for a certain disease, a certain ailment, that technology is moved along and it does benefit the patient. And that drives the need for clinical engineers, it drives the need for, medical technologists. because there was a statistic there quite a while ago that had, only 1% of ideas about new ways of, treating patients or new ways of diagnosing patients. Only 1% was ending up as a product that was being sold. So that's like 100 really good ideas, and only one of them was making it to market. So that's why having the knowledge in clinical technology is driving for better outcomes for patients. So it's every aspect then of, designing, manufacturing it, training people how to use those products. I have a group of third-year students at the moment working on a really interesting project, and the project is around upgrading a defibrillator used in an ambulance to a new model. But you're talking about a fleet of 400 ambulances. So it's understanding how that's done so that everyone is trained, that the devices are decommissioned and taken out of the ambulance. The new devices are tested and, set up so that they're ready to use. And having that all kind of seamless so that when someone goes into an ambulance, the defibrillator they know how to use is there, and they can use that on any patient. So there's a big kind of logistical side of it that's, really interesting, especially when you scale it up. That, in a hospital, you don't have one patient monitor, you probably have about 500. You don't have, one infusion pump, you probably have about 200 or 300. So it's the scaling things up is another part of it.
And what type of student do you think this course might suit?
I think this course would suit a student who is interested in health and interested in, having a career that involves people's health. And it's not, I think a lot of people would be used to kind of traditional health-related professions like nurses, doctors, physiotherapists, speech therapists, radiographers and things like that. But this is dealing with the technology side of it. So I suppose if you're interested in science, if you're interested in engineering, and you don't need to be very good at any of those particular subjects because we teach you everything that you need to know. But I suppose, and my advice would be to want to learn, those types of things and applying things like science and engineering to medicine. And, the points are kind of mid-300s at the moment. So, for example, if someone, really wanted to do medicine, but those points are out of reach, or someone who may be really interested in doing biomedical engineering or engineering UL, and those points may be out of reach, or, to become a radiographer is like nearly, 580 points in Trinity, if that's out of reach. Well, this course gives you really good knowledge, and then you can continue to study in postgraduate to become a radiographer or to become a physiotherapist, or you can do, graduate medicine. And we have a student at the moment who did her course, and now she's studying to become a radiographer. So that's the person who takes the images, the X-ray images, CT, MRI. She's training to do that in Cork at the moment. So I would say, being interested in science and engineering, and in particular, having the drive to work in medicine and for people's health in the future.
And for any student who is unsure what third level college or university to attend, could you tell us more about TUS, where it is and what it stands for, and why you would recommend TUS?
Yeah, so TUS stands for Technological University of the Shannon. It used to be LIT. I think a lot of us still call it LIT. Yeah. And what happened there about a year ago now is that LIT and Athlone IT combined together to become a university. So it used to be an institute of technology, but now it is a university, and it's a special type of university that's called a technological university. And that really means that what you learn is very applied. You really spend, it's half and half between, lectures and hands-on labs. And even what I teach, I would teach the theory of it in 1 hour, but I spent 2 hours or 3 hours having people apply that and do things either, simulation on computers, or physically build circuits, or physically, work with the equipment. And that's the difference, really, I would say, between TUS and UL, is that, it's practical, it's applied, and you for every module, it's probably 50-50 between sitting down, doing a final exam and your continuous assessment as you go along. So that means that your results aren't depending on, how good you perform to remember it, in a sitting exam. But by having done that CA, you're very well prepared for that exam. And, I know all my students' names. I know them all. I know what they want to do when they grow up and I help them to do that. And for me, that is so rewarding, knowing my students and helping them along and helping them to be, it's kind of a cliche, but helping them to be the best versions of themselves. I know I sound like this, speak, but helping people to really, thrive. And it is great. So TUS is a smaller university, kind of, your lecturers, know your name. I would like to think that we are very approachable. And, going by graduates, we ask graduates to give feedback, and that's what, always comes back, that they can talk to the lecturers if they're having issues, and there's great supports. And it's a really fun campus. I would recommend that, any opportunity to come to an open day or to come if your school is doing a kind of a visit to the campus or getting involved in things like Science Week and things like that, coming on campus and seeing just the vibe, like it's a bit of crack on the street. Have you ever been onto the campus? Yeah, it's a bit of crack there. Yeah. And, it's just a nice campus, and there's always things going on, and there's nice societies, and there's, loads of sports. So if anyone's interested in sport, there's great camogie and hurling and football. And, I had, fourth year students a couple of years ago, and they missed a lecture every week because they had camogie training. And I said, grand, that's fine, go to camogie training. And the next day I'd sit down and say, okay, this is what I covered. Have you any questions on this? So, encouraging the, your hobbies, like that's really important, to keep your hobbies into your adulthood. Yeah. So when people are, if they're into hurling or football or whatever it may be, music, art, to keep them on as hobbies. And TUS is great for that. I think it's a nice atmosphere for things like that.
Thank you so much for your time, and best of luck with your presentation to the senior students. We hope you enjoy it.
Thanks very much, and I really enjoyed doing the interview. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for...